Oz, thank you so much for having me here today. It's a pleasure to meet you. You're one of the legends in wine. I think it's that straightforward. Everybody knows your name. You've achieved so much, and I can't wait to find out all about you and to hear your stories. Can you give us a quick run through on your career? Where did your interest in wine start and sum it up to where we are today?
How long have you got?
Long enough.
Hey, welcome to my den, Guy. This is where I write. It's chaotic, as you can see. I'm always in the process of redoing my study, my den. One half of the room, this chaotic side, is my work side. The other half is my pleasure side.
Okay.
So as I lean to the right hand side from my desk, it means I'm forcing myself to write something. Most of the time, though, I'm leaning to the left-hand side. I'm pulling out all kinds of wonderful books, novels, books on railways, books on American football, books on politics, poetry. It's all over there. That's where I want to live my life, on the left-hand side of my study, not the right. But I'm still stuck with the right. And in there is my tasting area, so you can see hundreds of bottles all lined up against the wall, plus an American football up there and various other things. I don't know what the antifreeze is doing there, but there must be a reason. Maybe I'm trying to sweeten up some of my sauternes. And so here I am, and I somehow have fallen into this wonderful world of wine. I'd never meant to. I started out well, actually, that's not quite fair. Because when people say, how did you get involved in the world of wine? I do rather tell them that you've got to start young. And I started drinking when I was 3.
Okay.
Well, why wouldn't you if you had the chance? No, we were having a family picnic on the River Ouse. It's just near Cambridge. And my brother was drowning in the weir. And my father was trying to rescue him, and my mother was having hysterics. And I just looked on the far side of the picnic rug there, and there was this bottle of my mother's damson wine. And nobody was looking. So I drank it. Just delicious. Actually, my brother did survive, you'll be pleased to hear. My father managed to pull out one bedraggled son from the river, saw his other son lying pink and comatose on the other side of the picnic rug, picked me up by the ankles and whacked me in the stomach. And all this damson wine exited my person whence it had entered my person. And so that's how I started drinking wine. That put me off drinking till I was about 18. Well, but it also left me with an enduring love of wines that taste of damsons, as you can imagine. Argentine Malbecs, those sort of wines. Also because, of course, I know that they taste just as good on the way back up as they did on the way down. Which, when you get to be a student, it's worth knowing which ones taste okay on the way back up. It wasn't until I got to university that wine entered into my life again at all, because I went up to university knowing exactly what I wanted. Sex. But not knowing how to get it. And not having any money. And I discovered that there was this, I was flicking through the university handbook, and I discovered there was this university wine tasting club. And it was subsidized. So it meant that for £2 a term, you got 4 wine tastings. And I was thinking, God, 50 pence a tasting, I can just about afford that. And I thought, I'm going to be soigné and elegant and sophisticated, irresistible to the opposite sex. And then I saw the small print. You could take a guest. Suddenly 50 pence a tasting was 50 pence a date. And so I remember my first ever wine tasting. Her name was Francesca. And she was green from top to bottom. She had green hair. She had green sequins all over her face. She had a very skimpy green top. She had a very short green leather skirt. And the rest of her, which was frankly most of her, was covered in green body paint. And I put on my smart jeans and my shirt. And I remember I took Francesca to my first tasting. We went to this great big door in this college, and knocked on the door where this tasting was, and it was opened. Everybody inside the room was wearing a pinstripe suit.
I'm sure.
And then there was me in jeans and shirt, and Francesca, who was green from top to bottom. She didn't survive the evening. I don't think she ever spoke to me again. I took 4 girls to tastings that term. None of them ever spoke to me again. And it made me realize that actually that wine tasting and trying to have a decent social life was simply not working out for me. My social life went absolutely nowhere. But I got this idea of wine tasting. It's very interesting. Some things in life, if you're lucky, you suddenly catch them early on enough to make some use of them. Some people don't work out what they're really good at until they're 75 years old. But I was lucky. I went through that wine tasting aware that my attempts to impress Francesca were absolutely dropping through the floor. And I got what the guys were talking about and the flavors. I remember the final wine. They'd brought out a bottle to impress the young bucks, you know. And I sat there, by this time alone, at the back of the room, because Francesca had already gone. And they served us Chateau Leoville Barton 1962. And I can absolutely remember the flavour now. The flavour of pure blackcurrants, but fantastically dry. It was as though a dragon had sucked out all the sweetness from the fruit and just left the essence of the fruit. And they laid that over with this amazing smell of something like cedar wood or cigar boxes or Havana tobacco. And I just was tasting this thing. I think, I can't believe this. These are flavors that I never knew existed. Because I'd grown up with flavors because we lived out in the country when I was a kid and pretty much self-sufficient. I didn't go to school till I was about 6.5 years old. And my mother just kept me as her little helper. I did all the vegetables. I did all the fruits. I helped her with the chutneys and the pickles and the stews and the jams and everything. My world was about the smells and aromas of the garden, the orchard, and the kitchen. So aromas and smells I grew up with. I knew more about them by the age of 6 or 7, even though I couldn't read or write yet. I knew all about flavors. So when I finally did get to university, and I suddenly was faced with this astonishing world of flavors that I just didn't know existed, or I certainly had never thought could mingle together. I got it. I just got it. And it meant that I became really fascinated by wine very quickly and got into the university's tasting team and then moved on from there. I mean, partly the whole trouble was when you finish university and think, I really don't want to be a dry cleaner. I don't want to be a chartered accountant. I don't want to work in a cement works. So you think, well, what on earth am I going to do? And I just thought, well, there are two things I thought of which I could do, which would allow me to be sort of ageless and irresponsible and feckless and socially irrelevant. And I thought I could become one of Shakespeare's traveling players as an actor. And I did. I became an actor. And the other world was this world of wine. Because even then I had learned that wine renews itself every year. Every single year. It's all new. All over again. Whole thing starts again with vintage. Now, of course, it starts again twice. New World, Southern Hemisphere, and Old World, Northern Hemisphere. But even then, I thought, if it renews itself every year, I can renew myself every year. I can endlessly be renewed. I can endlessly use it as a sort of fount of youth. And I'll never have to retire. So long as wine is reinventing itself each year, I can reinvent myself every year. And that was really attractive because I had always had a terrible fear of getting older, a terrible fear of having to retire. One of the things I remember so strongly from my childhood was seeing an old man retire. 65 years old at the gravel works, and his picture was in the paper. And I said to my dad, why does he look so sad? And my dad said, well, he's been given a gold watch, and said, that's it, he's retiring. I said, but he obviously doesn't want to. He's obviously really sad. And my dad said, you have to retire when you're 65 years old. And I said to my father, I remember, I said, Daddy, I'm never going to retire. He said, well, you'd better never have a job then. And I said, all right, I won't. And it's true. I've never had a job. I've worked very hard. I mean, I often think I've worked a lot harder than a lot of my friends with really quite taxing jobs, but I've never had a job. I've never, ever wanted to have a job and be tied to someone saying, okay, we can now tell you what your life's going to be and when it's going to stop and when we're going to throw you out. Wine doesn't do that. So long as you're healthy, so long as you have an open mind, so long as you're continually interested in the world around you, in flavors, in smells, and in people, and in the changes. In this world of climate change that we're living in at the moment, there's never been a better time to be a wine person. But so long as you've got an open mind, so long as you care about all the things around you in the world, not just think, oh, wine is a tiny little strand which is all important to me. If you think wine is one beautiful thread in this fabulous piece of luck that we've been given by the good Lord or whatever, to be alive, to be this thing, this experience of being alive in this astonishing world of ours, the human world. And wine we're lucky to have this gorgeous thread, but it's just a thread. And it's just there with music. And it's just there with conversation and with friendship and with walking on a cliff top and with feeling the sun on your face and the wind in your hair and reading a bit of poetry and going to a football match is one strand. Wind it around. It's lovely that I've been able to take that strand as a quite central strand and wind other stuff around it. But I've never forgotten in wine that wine is one strand. And when I write about wine, I try to continually thread other stuff into it, tell stories about the world, tell stories about myself, tell stories about people I know, what they've done, places I've been, and then put the little strand of wine in the middle of it. But wine, 100% wine, doesn't interest me. Wine as a central strand is fascinating, but just wine, I think there are quite a lot of wine communicators who all they ever seem to think about is wine. And I just think, gosh, you're missing a lot. And how can you just go on day by day at your tasting desk, tasting wine, marking it all the time, trying to write yet another tasting note? I've got friends who write hundreds of tasting notes a day. And I just think, sometimes I take a whole day to write 5 tasting notes because I want my tasting notes to tell a story. And if they don't, I have to stop and think, there's no story. Eventually, I should probably then say, I won't write about this wine. I can't find a story in it.
You were at university, you'd had the moment that you told us about where you're going out on the dates, and this is your introduction to wine. How did you take the step from there to becoming this expert and to really advancing forward?
Having learnt about wine at university, having been in a university wine tasting team, I then became an actor, and then they suddenly, a friend of mine, Charles Metcalfe, a wonderful, wonderful wine chap, my dearest wine friend in the world, who was at university with me, he's the one who got me into wine. Because we were both doing an opera together and we both died terrible bloody deaths. So nobody would touch us at the interval. We used to have to scrub the artificial blood off each other in the shower. So we got to know each other pretty well by about 9 o'clock every night. He was the one who introduced me to wine. And I remember I was doing Dracula at Sheffield. The Sheffield Crucible, a wonderful theatre and a very happy time of doing good theatre in a gritty northern city, which was, for a southern boy like me, was very, very, very important and very interesting. I got this message saying they're getting an English wine tasting team together. You've got to come down and audition, do a blind tasting to try and get into the team. I had to go and say to the director in Sheffield of Dracula, can I have the afternoon off rehearsal to go and try and get into the English wine tasting team? I got the time off, but with a great deal of old-fashioned looks from the Yorkshire Brigade in Sheffield. Got down there, did the tasting. I got into the team. I didn't get in magnificently, but I got into the team. Then we threw down the gauntlet saying, anybody, we'll taste against anybody in the world. And we'll taste again on your wines. We'll taste on your territory. We have confidence we can beat anybody in the world as the English team. And the first lot, of course, who immediately accepted our challenge were the French, because the French saw another great opportunity to humiliate the English. And so we all went over to France. They'd hired this enormous palace near the centre of Paris, and they'd got television crews in from all over the world, as far away as Japan, They had television crews in to actually film the humiliation of the English being walloped at winemaking, setting us up. Well, we walloped them. And the next morning, Le Figaro, which is the sort of the Times of the French newspapers, they framed their front page in black out of shame that they had lost to the English at wine tasting. The only other time they'd done that since the Second World War was when President de Gaulle died. It was that humiliating for them. We came back to England, of course, and everyone was doing cartoons of us and pictures on the front pages of all the newspapers. It's wonderful. And we were heroes. And of course, you know what newspaper editors are like. They always want showbiz if they can get it. And at that time, had gone from Sheffield. I was now down at the National Theatre. And they said, oh, there's an actor. Quick, get the actor. And in fact, I tell you what, we send photographers on. They all turned up at the National Theatre. There I was dressed as a druid or something. I was doing As You Like It at the time. So I was playing, I was singing the songs to Feste in As You Like, not to Feste, to, Jaques in As You Like It. And I was dressed as a druid with my Welsh harp, with a big glass of champagne in my hand, saying cheers through my white beard. And all the newspapers picked up on this actor who's a wine taster. I was front page of all the newspapers. Next year we did Germany. I was playing Sweeney Todd at Drury Lane. So, of course, we won that one. And they came back and found me at Drury Lane and dressed as Sweeney Todd with a razor in one hand and a bloody great glass of champagne in the other hand. Again, the actor who knows about wine. The next one, what was it? Was it America? Oh, Italy or America we did next. And I was doing the Mitford Girls with Patricia Hodge at the Globe. The year after, I was playing General Perron in Evita at the Prince Edward. Each time they said, there's the actor. And so each year, of course, I got pictures of myself on the front page of these newspapers as a wine taster in the costume of the person I was performing at that time. And just at the same time as that, there was a new television show called BBC Food and Drink. And they decided, Peter Bazalgette, who is a wonderful producer, you know, he was just a young producer then, but he's now been chairman of ITV and God knows what. He's a smashing bloke. He said, okay, we're going to do this wine tasting, blind wine tasting, live in front of an audience at the studios on a Sunday as it happened. And of course, the bloke who was going to do it developed a terminal disease sort of 24 hours before the shoot, which he miraculously recovered from 2 days later. And he said he couldn't do it. I don't blame him. And of course, Baz thought, right, we're filming tomorrow. I really want to do this. He said, I know. Get me the actor who knows about wine. He didn't know what my name was. He just said, get me the actor who knows about wine. They discovered me. I got a message, I think, at the stage door saying, can you go down and film tomorrow for BBC? I thought, BBC? Prime time? Of course I can. I'm a young actor. I'll do anything to get on the BBC at prime time. I turned up down there. And he said, okay, I want you to do this blind tasting in front of an audience. And I had a bit of a cold. I thought, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to taste too well. And I said, sorry, it's in front of an audience. And he said, yeah, it's live in front of an audience. I said, will they know what the wine is? And he said, yeah, they'll know because there'll be a big board that they can see saying what the wine is, but you can't see the board, so you won't know. And I just thought, I've done pantomime. I can do this. I went out there and I saw this great big glass of glistening golden fluid there. And in those days, there weren't many Australian or New Zealand or California wines around. There were only two, as far as I knew, Australian Chardonnays. There was Rosemount Estate and there was Tyrrell's Vat 47 Chardonnay in the Hunter Valley. Big, viscous, golden, oily, rich sort of wines. I just looked straight away and I just thought, that's Australian Chardonnay. It's got to be Tyrrell's or the Rosemount. And one of the things I've always, when I'm teaching people about wine tasting, is first impressions. If you have a first impression, follow that first impression until you have a really good reason to decide against it. And I reckon first impressions, 3 times out of 4 in first impressions, you'll be right. And the 4th time, you'll be wrong. But that's 75%. So don't go against it. I thought, that's that bloody Australian thing. I went out there and said, God, look at that colour. That must be from somewhere warm.
Yeah.
Little ripple in the audience. I thought, it's the Australian Chardonnay. I said, well, France is quite warm. Silence. But on the whole, the Southern Hemisphere is a little bit warmer. Tiny ripple. I thought, it's the Australian Chardonnay. And I said, well, South Africa is quite warm. New Zealand is not very warm. Complete silence. I said, Australia, on the other hand, a little bit of a ripple. I thought, it's the Australian Chardonnay. I said, Australia is quite warm. And, I think this might be Australian. Great round of applause, Australian. I said, well, what about grapes? And I said, well, Sauvignon Blanc, silence, is not very golden. Riesling, silence, is quite light. Chardonnay, little ripple, is quite golden. I think, it's very like a Chardonnay. I think this is an Australian Chardonnay. Eventually I got down to saying, I think this wine is made by a bloke called Murray Tyrrell, and he's got a moustache, and his wife's got a moustache, and his dog's got a moustache, and he makes it in the Hunter Valley just near Sydney, and it's called Tyrrell's VAT 47, and you can get it in Waitrose for £5.99. That's exactly what the board said, minus the moustache, and the place erupted. And I went off the stage at the end, and Baz was there saying, that's absolutely wonderful. He said, do you want to join the series as a regular for our next series? And I went, yes, of course I do. And he said, oh, by the way, one thing, do you realize you forgot to taste the wine? I forgot to taste the wine. I've been so keen on playing the audience, I forgot to taste the wine. So I got a reputation as being this brilliant blind wine taster, and I'd never even tasted the wine. And that's how I got into television. And I got into writing in the same sort of way, just completely serendipitous. I was doing Sweeney Todd then, and because I was in the English wine tasting team, the Sunday Express were establishing a new regime, and they said, we want to make ourselves more upmarket. We should have a wine writer, shouldn't we? And the editor rang me up and he called me into his office, and he said, yes, blah, blah. You seem to know about wine, blah, blah, blah. And he said, can you write? And, you can either say no, or maybe, or yes. And I just said, yes, I can. And he said, excellent. Didn't say, well, can I see some examples? He said, excellent. He said, well, I think we should have a wine writer on the Sunday Express. Would you like to be the Sunday Express wine writer? And I'm playing, 2 hours later, I was playing a lead in the West End. I was playing Sweeney Todd in Drury Lane. I'm a wine writer. Honesty, as a chap who's trying not to grow up, trying to stay adolescent as long as possible, I was just thinking, when's real life going to kick in? All I'm doing is having these wonderful hobbies. People are paying me for it. I'm getting better known. And all I'm doing is indulging my hobbies. It was just a sublime time of life. And eventually the wine took over more. And I started doing books, and I started doing a weekly column in the Express, and then the Telegraph after that. Weekly column, quite challenging, 1,000 words a week. You've got to get it good. It's got to, especially with the Telegraph, got to be good. But with the Sunday Express, I mean, at those days, it seems silly looking at it now, but we won awards for our wine writing in the Sunday Express from the fancy pants awards, like the Glenfiddich Awards. So they were really taking it seriously, trying to upgrade the whole magazine through wine. It was a wonderful time to be doing it, because people were just beginning to think, this wine, it seems to be taking off. And of course, I knew it was going to take off. Well, I didn't know it was going to take off, but I wanted to be part of it taking off, partly because by that time I'd been to Australia as an actor. I'd been to Australia with Glenda Jackson, and with Patrick Stewart. Now, frankly, 6 months with Glenda Jackson is enough to drive a man to drink. But Patrick Stewart was an absolutely fantastic fellow and we're still friends. He was just the best guy to go out on a trip with. And I often, because I was the young squit in the Royal Shakespeare Company at the time, and often I would turn up at half time, and Patrick would come off stage and say, oh, for God's sake, Oz, that bloody woman, go and get me some wine, for Christ's sake. And he was playing a drunk in the second half, which helped quite. His second half performances were supposed to be full of ale, full of wine. It was in Hedda Gabler. He was playing Lovebure. And so I used to just go out into the bottle shops around the streets of Sydney or Melbourne or wherever it was and buy the cheapest wines I could get. They had names like Shiraz, which now we think, of course, Shiraz, we all know that. We didn't then. They had names like Riesling. They had names like Chablis. I knew Chablis. Not this one, mate. This one, France. Where's France? Well, Hermitage, Burgundy. I just got all these bottles, $1 or $2 a time. And they were, without exception, just fantastic, bursting with flavour. I went back to England thinking there's a new world out there. Of course, we then went to California. Happened all over again. Californian cheap wine was fantastic. Australian cheap wine was fantastic. European cheap wine was complete piss. We were being forced to drink the scrapings of some of the lousiest, stinkiest barrels in Southern Europe, and that was supposed to be wine. Well, at the end of the 60s, they reckon only 5% of people in Britain drank wine. I'm not bloody surprised. The stuff was filthy. If we had no popular wine culture, of course we didn't. Popular wine was disgusting. All that, just dreadful, rubbishy, sour, harsh red wines and sulphurous, thick white wines. Why on earth would we have a wine culture then? And this is what Gilly Goulden and I really felt on BBC Food and Drink, because she's a wonderful, wonderful communicator, Gilly Goulden, and a real star, a really fabulous woman on TV. And we both thought this world of wine that is out there, that the tiny little bit of good wine at the top is surrounded by people with toffee-nosed people in cobwebby old pinstripe suits. The last thing we want to do is join them. And by the way, the last thing they want is anything to do with us. And so we said, we're going to try and democratize wine. We knew what wine drinking was like around the Mediterranean. I knew what it was like in California and Australia and places. We thought, and in fact, Gilly did as well, because when I was doing Evita, I managed to get 6 days off. I was playing General Perron, and I got 6 days off to go to Australia and come back in 6 days. It's madness. And of course, I sat down at Heathrow in my seat on the plane next to this batty, gorgeous, frizzle-haired blonde called Gilly Goulden, and we drank Jacob's Creek Shiraz Grenache from Heathrow to Adelaide. And I learnt an awful lot about life in that 24 hours. And I was like joined at the hip with her all the way through that trip. And then I had to dash back to London to do a photo call with our new Evita, looking, I would have thought 30 years older than I was, but that's fine because I was only about 30 and they needed, and General Perron was more like 60. So I didn't even need any makeup for that one. But I met this amazing woman, and I just thought I've got an absolute sense of empathy with her, a sort of a soul sister. And so we started doing these shows together, a couple of years later, we just said, we can democratize wine. We can make a difference. Why don't we just go out there in our own way? We're not going to wear a suit ever. We're not going to wear a tie ever. And jeans. I had all kinds of really bizarre t-shirts with all kinds of strange stuff stuck on them. Gilly used to dress herself up in, well, whatever. Her most effective stuff was sort of incredibly tight, sort of, minimalist kind of dress, which meant that all over England, people were going, my God, who is that? And then she came out with these completely inane, but brilliantly inane ideas about what wine tasted like all the time. She used to treat me abominably. She used to put her hand over my mouth while I was speaking on camera. She would push me off the stage while the camera was running, while I was in the middle of saying something. And Baz said, do you want me to stop this? And I said, no, Baz, no, I think it's brilliant. He said, are you sure? He said, because I think it's brilliant, because television is about telling stories and having a relationship. And he said, you and Gilly Goulden, you're television gold, but do you mind? Because she's treating you abominably. I said, no, because I get it. I'm the henpecked hubby. I get it. It's all right. I get it. And of course, my mother hated it, but it made us, it got everywhere around Britain you used to go. Everyone used to talk Aussie's wines and Gilly's wines. And in 5 to 10 years, we felt that we had created a new language, a new way of communicating, and we honestly felt we'd set out to democratize wine, and we bloody well had. And the people, to this day, Guy, some of the old timers still get really aggressive about my performances on television and Gilly's performances on television, even now. Even when the world of wine has changed beyond recognition, even when their companies they've probably retired from them, but I still meet them occasionally, grumpily wandering around wine tastings. And even now, with their companies have made millions of pounds profit because of Australian Shiraz, because of New Zealand Sauvignon, because of Chilean Merlot, they still seem to resent it, which is completely bizarre, because we set out in life. I've always felt I wanted to change things in life, but I didn't ever do enough hard work to change things as a lawyer, or hard work to change things as a politician or something. But in my funny little world of wine, I did want to change things, and so did Gilly Goulden, and I think we did.
That's the end of part 1. The second half is available in the next podcast with Clarke.